Oh, sorry. Welcome to country. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledges the Gundungurra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land we now call the Wingecarribee Shire. I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today. My name is Julie Walsh and I'm the chair of today's panel. Also sitting on the panel today are expert members Heather Wharton, Linda Kelly at the end, and community member Robert Stass immediately adjacent. The meeting is being live streamed and Council's website, and the recording will be made available on the website after the meeting. Could everyone please turn their mobile phones to silent? There are no apologies. We have a full complement on the panel today. Declarations of interest. I have a significant non-pecuniary interest in item 6.3, review of determination DA 22/023.1, 24 Waverley Parade, Mittagong, as I chaired the local planning panel meeting which refused the original development application. I will not take part in any discussions or the determination of that item. I will vacate the chamber at the conclusion of item 6.2 and Heather Wharton will chair that part of the meeting dealing with item 6.3. Robert Stass has a non-significant non-pecuniary interest in item 6.2, 2 Homehale Street, Bowral, as he was formerly a director of NBRS Architecture, the applicant's heritage consultant. He has no continuing association with that firm and no knowledge of this project. In those circumstances, the interest is non-significant and he may participate in the deliberation and determination of that item. The procedure for the meeting, the council website contains a copy of the operational guidelines for the panel meetings, but I'll summarise the most important points. The panel is charged with determining the 3 development application items on the agenda today. We will hear from registered speakers, members of the public first, followed by applicants' representatives. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, but that may be extended at my discretion. The panel members may have questions and I may seek a response to any issue from the relevant council officer. This is very important. Once a speaker has spoken, they will not be permitted to speak again unless it is in response to a question by the chair or another panel member. When we've heard from all speakers, we'll move into closed session to deliberate and we'll return to the public meeting to announce our advice, and that will also be live streamed. The minutes of the meeting should be placed on the council website within 2 business days. So if I could start with the first item, which is 6.1, development application 22/0995, dual occupancy and Torrens title land subdivision for 13 Caroline Avenue, Bowral. The first registered speaker I have is Raymond Harrison. If you could come forward, please. Thank you. Have a seat. Yes.
Yes. Should I start?
Please
there?
proceed. Yes.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to express my views on this proposed development. My name is Raymond Harrison. I live at 22 Caroline Avenue, Bowral, directly opposite the proposed development. My wife and I moved into the area 12 months ago seeking a tree change. Currently overused term, but relevant. We previously lived in the Canterbury Bankstown area, which has become over the past 10 years a resident's nightmare with overdevelopment, namely with duplexes and subdivisions. We bought into the Retford Park estate, and while the guidelines were a little onerous and expensive, they made sense for the longer term to ensure a prestige country lifestyle. I would just like to quote from the guidelines as approved by the late James Fairfax. The design guidelines will assure future residents that their investment will retain its value. James Fairfax believes there is an obligation to buyers to assist in protecting their investment and lifestyle by the establishment of minimum requirement design guidelines to ensure the collective vision for the estate is achieved. Buying into the Retford Park estate means that the commitment, investment and pride in a new home is shared by all residents and evident when walking down the streets of the Retford Park today, tomorrow and for years to come. This vision to date has largely been achieved, and the estate community is currently a delight to be a part of. The proposed development does not meet the vision of the late James Fairfax. The proposed development will create lots which have building envelopes which are not in keeping with the established building lines and setbacks. The proposed development is not in keeping with the intended and existing character of the area. The proposed development is out of character with the existing surrounding developments. In conclusion, environmental impact studies have become an art form to secure development approvals that are not necessarily in the public interest and are the beginning of a slippery slope to overdevelopment and changing the character of a region. Thank you for the opportunity to express my views.
Thank you. I'll just see if there's any questions. Thank you for coming along today. Thank you. The next speaker I have is Matthew Boone. So if you just press the...
Okay, all good?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Matthew Boone from 26 Caroline Avenue. I do live directly opposite the proposed development. Thanks for the opportunity really for providing us the chance to address the Wingery local planning panel. I'd really like to speak to, I guess, 3 or 4 key areas. Firstly, in our opinion, this does not meet the spirit of a corner lot in the Wingery DCP. To quote that DCP, any development on a corner lot should ensure that the dwelling addresses both street frontages. Such developments enhances the streetscape of both the streets involved, and it presents an attractive facade to both streets. The DCP repeatedly refers to both street frontages and both the streets involved. Caroline Avenue is a single street with a single name, not 2 streets. Further goes on to say that the design of both dwellings reflects the scale and density of surrounding development. This proposal does not reflect the scale and density of any property in Caroline Avenue, and indeed for much of the wider Retford Park estate. In relation to Council's observation, approval has already been granted for a detached dual occupancy at number 40, number 17 and number 1 Sir James Fairfax Circuit. These 3 lots all have 2 separate, contiguous and differently named streets at the intersection. A precedent, therefore, we believe has not been set, and allowing this subdivision will in fact set a precedent in the estate and wider Wingery Shire, allowing dual occupancy and subdivision on what is essentially any curved street in the Shire. Further, the New South Wales State Environment Planning Policy defines a corner lot as one that has 2 contiguous boundaries with a road or roads that intersect. There is no intersection. There is a curve in the avenue. Council's response was that it believes that the site falls within this definition. We would like to get, I guess, concrete and credible facts that it does in fact meet that definition. Secondly, the right to privacy and peaceful enjoyment. This will really create a lack of privacy and personal peaceful enjoyment for existing property on the western side. And also, we believe, limited privacy and right to peaceful enjoyment for the 2 proposed lots due to minimal separation on proposed and existing common boundaries. The other area would be inappropriate boundary and fencing design. The Wingery DCP states no solid timber paling fences shall be permissible on any street frontage. A solid timber fence on any part of Caroline Avenue is inconsistent with the existing streetscape carefully developed by community. We note that there are attempts to mitigate this with a 1 metre area for shrubs on the other side of the solid fence. We believe this will become actually an even greater eyesore, as once the fence is put up, the residents will not believe that's their responsibility to look after that. Fourthly, I guess a couple of non-compliant areas which were addressed by the council. The Lot A garage is not compliant with the 40% sort of maximum width of a garage rule. And also, where we see some of the easements, it appears that the driveway of proposed Lot A and the corner of Lot B seem to run over a sewer main easement. So we're just interested with that in general. Just to conclude, if I may, I think that was my timer. Yeah,
That was,
5
yes.
seconds.
Yeah.
I just really wanted to conclude by saying that with the appointment of the administrator some time ago, we in the community really felt as a vibrant, strong and supportive group of individuals that, you know, there was a chance now that we would be listened to a little bit more intently in terms of making sure the vision we bought into, which was referenced by Raymond, is sort of carried forward in perpetuity. But with that, thank you very much for your time and for allowing me to address you. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have any questions, Heather?
Yes, just the reference you had to the sewer line.
Yeah.
Is that like a, I know Wingecarribee is its own water and sewer authority, like I would say Sydney Water in Sydney, but it's that, you understand that's an actual infrastructure, piece of infrastructure?
Yes, just when you look at the plans which were submitted,
Yeah.
it appears that, as I said, parts of it are actually running over an easement, existing easement, as highlighted on the plan. So I was interested in that. Yep.
Okay. And just you mentioned you had concerns about privacy in terms of your dwelling.
Yep.
Was that as a result of particular windows or particular orientation of the building, or which dwelling are we
No,
talking
sorry,
about?
I was referring more to the property on the western side, owned by Mr. Barham, who will speak shortly.
Oh, so not your property?
Not my property.
Not-
I mean,
'cause you're across the road.
I'm across the road. So from my point of view, it's more a case of the line of sight, so having a closed line, for example, on the front of the street. So
Right.
there's a certain number of visual aspects in front of me directly which are of concern. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Brian Barham.
We're
Please
on.
proceed. Thank you.
You can hear me? That's good.
Yes.
Hey, so, yeah, I'm Brian. I'd like to firstly say thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak. We are the family next door, so we're in lot 11 Caroline Avenue. And just like to say that we feel that we're directly affected by this approval, if given that's the case. Remember, the council and developers move on, but those that live in our communities will be there and have to suffer the consequences and maybe the inconsistencies of some of these decisions for many years to be had in the future. A significant number of Redford Park residents, we all do talk, and the community is a good community that does that. And we feel that there's some, that this development does not promote harmony, and that's certainly one of the values of council. Also, we're a little bit disappointed about the mistrust in the system where we signed up for particular covenants and they no longer apply in the planning rules. And we're just worried that we're supporting profit over community and whether that's the right emphasis for us to follow. On the corner block, as Matt has talked about many of these points, I'd just like to draw your attention to this corner here and corners in the ceiling. These are corners. These corners are 90 degrees and they have two edges. This perceived corner block, it's a curve. It's like a horseshoe and there's three properties on the bottom of that shoe. To me, it doesn't look like a corner block. Other corner blocks, as Matt said, have got two road frontages, and that makes so much sense. We never saw this coming as a community. We didn't expect this to happen like this. Also, the garage, Matt talked about that. Again, it doesn't meet the regulations, and it's disappointing to us because we have to drive in and out of our garage every day 2 or 3 times. And community members go past and they'll know that we had to stick by some rules. And some of these rules on merit looks like may be changed for this development. And we wonder, is that fair? The setback on the boundary, my boundary to the fence line is 2.1 metres. The boundary on lot B is 1.56. Put it this way, if you and your colleague are on the same pay and you get a 26% pay cut, is that fair? for doing the same job? That's how I feel. I've got 2.1 metres, 26% closer to me, and in the planning report that I read through, it says the setback is similar. I don't think that's similar if I'm reading the documents right. So I feel that that's unfair. How is this similar? Please consider whether that's right and fair in this situation. The morning sun, it was talked about in the document there. I've got 3 hours of morning sun in winter, 2 buildings, if it was replaced with just one, I would have more sun. Why is it that a developer and a profit maker gets his way and moves on, but I have to suffer this as I live there? And is this fair and right? We talked about the sewer. The other thing was the air conditioning. If you can move that, that's beautiful, mate. Good stuff. If you can move that air conditioner, that'll be good. The quality of the home, we have to put in a lot of covenants, a lot of expenses for the quality of the home. Is it better to build one good value home and make the same profit margin compared to having to put up with all this to try and get 2 homes in? Surely you've done the math and, maybe recheck that. Have you considered about the effects on the value of our homes in this area now?
Mr. Barham, you're going to have to conclude.
Yep,
now.
and I'm just
Thank you.
closing,
Yep.
looking for how will we be compensated by the owner of Lot 13? So thank you very much, and I hope you consider my few points.
Thank you. I'll just check if there's any questions.
I have a question.
That's cool.
So, being next door, you've obviously accepted that there will be a house
Sure.
or a building next
Yes.
to you, and you've run through a few issues that you have with this dual occupancy proposal. If you were having just one building next to you, what would you say was your biggest concern? Would it be the side setbacks? Would it be the loss of sunlight? What would be, if it was
Well,
just
it's hard
one
to
house?
just have one. But you mentioned 2 good ones. So I'm not sure there's been a report about the shading on my property. It'd be unfair if there wasn't, so that there's some due analysis about this. But certainly that 2.1 metres that I've had to comply to, and that boundary's not. That don't underestimate that extra 26%. That's a big number. It provides a little bit more space and freedom. And I think that is so important in our housing communities to have that around our homes. And particularly that the services are on that side in some degree, and there'll be noise, and that shading. So my question, would be, do we have a shading report on my property? 2 homes versus 1? So how did we come up with 3 hours? Right. How did we work out there's 3 hours of sunlight in middle winter? That was...
It's not a debating session, so
Oh, okay, that was my
you
own
provide
question.
your submissions.
Yeah.
That was Nancy Sample, the Manager,
Thank you,
Development
Nancy.
Assistant. So that's something that we will take into account
Sure.
when we go into closed
Yep.
session. We will have a look at
Okay.
that
Thank you so much.
issue.
Did that answer your questions? Thank you.
Thank you for coming along. So that's the registered speakers from the public. I also have Alex Goodsell representing the applicant. Please come forward. And are you the applicant
Yes, correct, yeah.
himself or?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak on this matter. So I'm actually the applicant for this project, for the DA on this project. So I'm a local resident, have been all my life. I'm 26, I'm born in Barrel, and I'm looking to continue my life here in Barrel. As you know, it's quite difficult to get into the market here, and this is an opportunity to help me stay in the Barrel market and bring my family up where I grew up. I intend to live in the southern dwelling, and want to explain that I'm not here to exploit the area for my personal gain. It's just to simply take advantage of an opportunity to get in the property market. I think the submissions have been very well refuted in the report, so I won't say much as to that, but some basic points about the block. This is one of the larger parcels of land in the estate, and due to the shape of the block, it lends itself to a well-planned development like this. Where other similar developments have been in the locality have been approved, they've been situated on 1,000 square metres, whereas mine is 1.5 times larger at 1,506 square metres, so this allows for around 10 metres between two dwellings. As mentioned, this will be my own residence, so I intend to care for it and maintain it as such. The builder that I've employed to do the build is McDonald Jones, or MJH Group, and they, as a builder, have completed over 10 homes in the estate already, so it's in keeping with the surrounding dwellings. And I feel that this is a well-planned development that will have very minimal effect on its surroundings and provide a good atmosphere to bring my family up. Thank you.
Okay, just wait there. There's any questions? Do you have any questions, Heather?
Yes, thanks, Julie. One of the objectors at least, or maybe both of them, referred to the concern about the front paling fence. And I guess that's possibly part of the reason for that is there's a drying area in what is essentially the front setback. Is it possible to put the clothesline somewhere else and
Yeah.
not have that fence? Or how wedded are you to having that front fence along the front boundary?
The front fence was literally just something to put in the development application. It's not necessarily set in stone, so we could accommodate that, no problem.
So I was asking, can you accommodate having no paling fence? That was my question.
Yes, yeah, no problem, yep. Thank you.
Thank you for coming along. Okay, the next, so as I indicated at the outset, we will go into closed session to deliberate on that item, and we'll give our determination with all of the items together at the conclusion of the meeting. The next item is 6.2, Development Application 22/1133, Residential Flat Buildings at 2 Homehale Street, Bowral. The first member of the public registered is Stephen Marshall. Thank you. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak at today's meeting of the local planning panel. My name is Stephen Marshall, and I live at 63 Bendooley Street, Bowral, next door to Gwen Ballard at 61 Bowral Street, whose property adjoins the proposed development in Holmhill Street. When we were advised of the plans for Holmhill Street, my wife and I were sufficiently alarmed by the sheer bulk and size of the developer's proposal that we spent some time researching local planning regulations to see how and if it could possibly comply. Well, we have absolutely no problem with this site being developed, but we're amazed to find that so many aspects of the application seem to totally ignore the planning requirements. I'm sure the planning panel are aware that we are not all experts on these matters, and that emotion can sometimes blur a practical response to what we and others who have made submissions see as a gross architectural intrusion on our neighbourhood. I have no intention of going over the details of our submission, as I'm impressed and pleased to see that Council has carefully considered and included the vast majority of our concerns in its report. I would also like to add that I heartily concur with the conclusions that the contributors to this comprehensive report have reached in recommending refusal of this application on multiple grounds of failing to comply with a very clear set of planning rules, heritage considerations, Bowral's built environment, and neighbours' right to the continued enjoyment of their property. And I would like to finish by saying that it is our hope that the report's recommended refusal of DA 22/1133 will be ratified. Thank you.
Thank you. Just wait there. There might be questions. Do you have any questions, Ella?
Can I just ask you what you believe the principal impact will be on your property?
On my property, well, I can actually see through, in the winter, I can actually see right through to that property, and in its bulk, I would be looking at that as well, and everything else. So when the trees will use their leaves, we look straight across. When Bullard's garden, her house is set back behind ours, and we literally look straight across at that site.
And you understand that there would be some development here, even if it wasn't this development?
Absolutely.
And you would see that development?
Well, hopefully not in the bulk and scale that it's currently proposed.
So is it the bulk and scale that's...
The bulk and scale, the setbacks, etc. It doesn't, in our view and what we've read, it doesn't comply at all with the planning requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rosalind Morris.
Is this on? Yeah.
Please proceed.
Hello? Thank you for the opportunity, firstly, to address the panel regarding my strong opposition to the planned development at 2 Holmhale Street. I live next door in a unit that is very close to and directly overlooking this site. Mine and other residents' written submissions have fully covered the multiple issues that make this proposal a violation in both legal and human quality of life terms. So due to the time constraints, I will limit my focus today to the areas that I feel will most severely impact on my quality of life. I've lived in my home in Holmhale Street for over 24 years. I moved there specifically for the beauty of the architectural as well as natural environment. The outlook from my lounge area and my bedroom is of a glorious large native trees, frequently visited by a wonderful variety of local native bird life, a visual as well as an auditory delight. The sun warms parts of my veranda and my backyard all year round and is especially welcome in the cold winter months as the low northern sun creeps into my lounge and bedroom. I also have the pleasure of growing vegetables and flowers in some parts of my small garden. I've always highly valued the quiet and calming seclusion I experience in my apartment and surrounds. But now, as I'm ageing and I work from home, I find it even more vital that intrusive noise levels do not interfere with my work specifically and my peace generally. The proposed gross overdevelopment of the site, a 4-storey, 10-apartment block construction, threatens to destroy all of which I've just spoken of. I will summarise these in 3 points. 1, it seems that at least 25 trees, including the larger ones in which local bird life gather, are marked to be cut down. This will be devastating for my and others' visual outlook, not to mention the general impact on the beauty of the area. Number 2, the huge development will overshadow mine and adjoining homes. This means a loss of sun and light at certain times of the year and the day, which would potentially be even worse in winter months. My ability to grow vegetables and other plants, or simply to sit on my veranda and enjoy the warmth of the sun, will be hugely diminished, if not made impossible for part of the year. Number 3, the proposed oversized development is for 10 3 to 4 bedroom family apartments with many windows and open balconies and outdoor common areas close to my and others' borders. This will overlook or look directly into my and neighbouring homes. I dread the unbearable increase in noise levels plus the visual invasion into my home that must inevitably accompany such inappropriate high-density living. I've nearly finished. I see this as an indefensible loss of my and others' basic right to visual and acoustic privacy. In conclusion, I implore you to take into account the profound negative impact this proposed development would have on my and others' treasured homes and its undermining of our quality of life. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. I'll just see if there's any questions.
No.
No?
No, I had no questions either. Thank you for coming along today. So I have 4 people registered to speak for the applicant, the owner, the consultant planner, the architect, and the heritage consultant. So who would like to go first? Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you. There are the 4 of us here, but I'm happy to give a brief response, and then the rest of the team is happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
may
And
have.
just before you start, I just wanted to let you know we have received some additional material from
Fantastic.
you, which was some shadow diagrams, an aerial perspective of the building footprint and that over the road, and setbacks to heritage conservation areas. And I anticipate that all of the panel members have questions for you. So please proceed.
Terrific, thank you. My name is Juliette Grant, and I'm from Guide Consulting. We're the planning firm that prepared this development application. I'm joined here by Cameron Jones from Innovate, who is the architect, Sophie Brock from NBRS, who's the heritage consultant, and also Adam Dominelli, who is the landowner and applicant for this project. So we're all available as required. We've been working collaboratively with Council on this project over the last 12 months, and I thank Nancy for that, on the basis that this site is strategically located to support much-needed housing supply and diversity in Bowral, as identified in Council's LSPS. We genuinely thought that we had addressed the design issues raised in the various discussions and face-to-face meetings that we had with Council officers. So we're therefore quite surprised when we saw the report online last week and the recommendation for refusal. We do not believe the report provides a balanced assessment, and I would like to respond to each of the 5 reasons for refusal. Firstly, in terms of compliance with SEP 65 and the Apartment Design Guideline. The compliance table in the report indicates compliance with the vast majority of provisions. Where there are areas of non-compliance highlighted, the commentary in the report doesn't actually reflect the current version of the project. For example, commentary around overshadowing of 6 Holmhale indicates that it's unclear and that there's significant overshadowing, and yet the shadow diagrams clearly show that after 10 a.m. on a midwinter's day, all of the adjoining property at number 6 is actually receiving sunlight. The apartment mix is identified as an area of non-compliance, but the ADG actually only specifies a variety that responds to market demands and projected demographic trends. It doesn't set a specific numeric requirement. There's also a number of references in that assessment table that seem to refer to an incorrect site. For example, in terms of public domain interface, where it talks about front fences, it refers to Mainyard Park, which does not adjoin our site. Similarly, the park is referenced in other parts of the report, and discussion about car park protrusion refers to the entrance from Holmhale, but this is not correct. The entrance is from Bowral Street. The vehicle access references are incorrect in a number of places in that section of the report, and planting on structures incorrectly refers to the previous use, previous plans. So I question the ability to rely on that ADG compliance table for a determination. The next item for reason for refusal relates to compliance with the LEP aims and the zone objectives specifically. The aims of the LEP are listed in the report at page 112 relating to heritage and environmental conservation and providing housing choice. This proposal will provide medium density buildings within the existing residential environment and contribute to increased housing diversity and supply. The report from NBRS Architecture, the Heritage Assessment, has demonstrated that the amended scheme is consistent with the heritage provisions of the LEP and the DCP, and we'll cover those a little bit more later. The objectives of the R3 zone in the report are listed to include providing for local housing needs and medium density housing, and that variety. Again, this proposal provides that opportunity to give a transition between dwelling houses and the unit market. Council's local housing strategy indicated that housing stock in Wingecarribee is largely dominated by detached housing, with up to 91% of all dwellings being detached housing. With a significant amount of land being zoned for medium density development, this is the opportunity to actually increase that proportion, where in the two census periods between 2006 and 2016, that proportion actually declined. So this is our opportunity to address that mismatch in housing typology. As you know, the LEP does not contain development standards for height or FSR, so that leads us to the DCP. Compliance with the DCP is reported on pages 117 to 122, and it indicates compliance with the key provisions. Height, the 3-storey height is considered acceptable, and I note one of the speakers referred to a 4-storey development, and unfortunately that is a previous set of plans, so is not the current proposal. So we comply with height, we comply with landscape area, that we have over 50% now, so we comply with the DCP in landscape. The urban design comment at page 87 indicates that the setbacks are acceptable and that we comply with the front setbacks. The roof design has been amended from the original plans and now is provided at Council's request, the form that was discussed. We certainly acknowledge that we do not comply with the DCP's floor space ratio control. And as you know, that DCP control is a guidance and an opportunity to provide some way of controlling the built form, balancing all of the other setbacks, height and landscape requirements. This flexibility is built into those DCP controls in section 3.4.2 of the DCP, and that's discussed at page 118 in the report, where it talks about the ability to have flexibility in the FSR, where the design does not detract from the streetscape and local character, and I'll address that in a moment, and it does not compromise the amenity of the proposed or existing dwellings. And nowhere in the report is there a suggestion that this development would not provide suitable amenity. In terms of the heritage considerations, the site is not heritage.
Will you be much longer?
No.
I've let you go on, but I'd like you to finish shortly.
Yes,
thanks.
yes, that's fine. So the site is not heritage listed, it's not in a heritage conservation, and the diagram that I've supplied shows you the considerable setbacks provided to the existing heritage item. And the Heritage Advisor notes on page 85 in the report that the impact is acceptable given the R3 zone and the change in that zoning. In terms of character, the final point, the site sits at a zone transition, and the assessment report states that the area is in transition. We all are aware of planning principles that talk about consistency and not sameness, and the importance of height, setback and landscape as the defining factors for character. And as I've mentioned, we comply with height, setback and landscape requirements. So clearly my client would love to see an approval for this site and for this development that we think genuinely will add value to the community and to the area. We did request without prejudice conditions to be prepared to assist the panel if you were of a mind to go that way. Alternatively, we would be delighted to be able to continue to work with Council if the matter was deferred so that we can resolve these last remaining items.
Thank you. There are some questions.
Sure. Just going to the issue of the bulk of the development, which is raised in the report and also by the objectors. Just when you look at the, say, the west elevation to Home Hale Street, it does appear that the basement, and it's evident on the sections as well, the basement is definitely raised above the ground. So potentially that it could be described as a 4-storey development, because I'm not sure what the RLs are or whether that is raised more than a metre, but it looks like it is more than a metre. And just on this, which is the west elevation, there's the slope of the site, but the building doesn't step. I'm I was just interested as to why potentially the site constraints or site topography hadn't been taken into account and what was driving the need to raise the basement.
I suspect that's driveway gradients, but Cameron would be much better to answer that question if Cameron can
Okay.
come and join to answer
We've
that
got more
question.
okay, the
Yeah,
architect.
yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Cameron, do you want to?
But I'm happy if the architect wants to come
Yeah.
and answer that question, and then we can not have to come back to it.
sorry, I forgot
go
the
ahead.
architect was speaking
Yeah.
as well.
Thank you, panel. The broad desire was that all apartments were adapted. We were trying to get single level living throughout the site. We're very conscious of the fact that we complied with the 12-metre overall height control. In fact, we were quite below it at the southern end of the site. So the idea was to have a flat plate where we could. So the idea is that we've got a 3-storey, essentially similar to a 3-storey walk-up, obviously with lift access on all apartments. And a lot of the research we did in and around the local area on new apartments where there were 2-storey apartments or apartments with lofts. So the desire was essentially to have every apartment available for that longevity and adaptability. So that's why we wanted to work on a flat plate scenario. So it was broadly in and around working with minimising excavation on the site, nestling the building within the site itself and working to the 12-metre upper limit.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. I had some questions. I don't care which one of you answers it. In the report, at page 123, there's an extract from the DCP showing a form of building including what I call rims in the roof, which I think is the form that the residential flat building across the road is taking. And I've certainly seen that sort of sketch in other DCPs, particularly council areas that I guess have a lot of traditional types of buildings. I'm thinking, for example, Mossman. And then the section DD shows the form of the proposal. Is there any reason why you didn't, I'm just interested in your reason why you didn't actually apply that form as contemplated in the DCP for this site?
We saw the site and the strategic direction of the council as potentially transitioning in this respect. We did work with council through a couple of reiterations of the original plans. We were focused on trying to create larger apartments with greater amenity. I mean, if you look at the size of the apartments and the obviously the overall yield on the site, so we're at 10 apartments for a large site, and if you were to compare that to other developments around. So the aim was that we were to provide single level apartments, and the mansard style roof with the standing seam profiles on the top, we believe still reflected that, very much that Highlands, which we kept hearing a lot from Nancy and the team, was that reflecting that Highlands style whilst affording us those single level apartments, rather than breaking that first floor level into a series of apartments with loft style bedrooms, which we didn't see as being required or there being a local appetite for. Our desire was again. So we really felt that through the reiteration in design, we'd achieved exactly that, which was that Highland style, but allowing us to have those larger single apartments. And again, that was a desire from the feedback we're getting from apartments, and you've probably seen the apartments on your drive-through on the opposite side of the road today. They're predominantly made up of smaller apartments with very small balconies, which again, we didn't believe was achieving the amenity which some of the locals, the feedback we were getting is what they were what they were after in the local area.
Yeah, sorry, if I could just go back to Juliet. You touched on this already. I was interested in the non-compliance with the DCP control for FSR. 0.6 is a fairly low FSR for a medium density zone, but that's I guess expressing council's desired density. I had a look at your statement of environmental effects because I was interested to see what the justification in that was in terms of why 0.6 can be complied with, and it just says complies with it complies with the objectives. But then I go to the next page and it says, sorry, you haven't got this in front of you, I know. One of the objectives is specific controls, and then the first thing I see is, no, it doesn't comply, but acceptable on merit. Just could you summarise why you think the extra FSR or the extra density, which is bulk in essence, is acceptable?
Sure. So we actually started off looking at, when we first did the discussions with Adam, about what sort of building form we could have on the site, and we looked at whether it would be seniors housing, which would provide ordinarily, in those days, under the old senior SEP, would have been a 1-to-1 FSR. Now I acknowledge that seniors wasn't a pathway open because at that stage that housing, the senior SEP didn't apply in this area due to the drinking water catchment. But to try and get a feel for what other comparable FSRs might apply, we looked at the senior SEP, we looked at what the building form we could get from a complying development, and the development form, and we've got some sketches if you're interested, but the development form that could be generated as a consequence of a complying development scheme would bring a 2-storey building much closer to the boundaries. So we sort of mapped that kind of built form, and then we looked at, well, if we comply with the height and we comply with the setbacks and we comply with the landscape area, what's the building form and FSR that's then left? And we talked about, Cameron described it as scooping out some of the FSR, with an ice cream scoop, but that would make us technically comply, but it wouldn't necessarily achieve any greater setbacks or any greater landscaped area. So we didn't see the necessity to comply to the hard and fast rule of the 0.6 when we were achieving the other objectives of that sort of built form control.
And this may be a question for either of you. In the report, there's mention about the size of the balconies. Do you have any response to that? I think they are quite large on the first floor, 38 square metres potential. And in your extra material, I've noticed that we received a diagram showing step backs to the neighbours. This one. The council report raises the issue about them being large. Have you got any response to that?
They were intentionally large, and Cameron can elaborate, but they were intentionally large on the basis that this is kind of providing a housing product that provided a transition from people who may live locally in a large dwelling house and making their first step into a unit, may still wish to have a little garden, on their balcony, still have area where they can enjoy the outside. So it was an intentional element for the amenity of those residents, with the opportunity to ensure that we weren't impacting on privacy and overlooking. Is it?
Yeah, predominantly. When we met early with the planning team, it was in and around, let's look at the overall, which is the ADG and the ADG planning controls. And I know there is mention in the report about how large these units are, and there's no real control over how large there's an expectation of how big a 1 and a 2 and a 3 bedroom should be or can be, but there's no real limit as to how large these units can be. And the idea here was, again, all in and around amenity. This is all in and around providing as much amenity as we can, and we've got a history of these larger apartments, and they've been incredibly successful in that the occupants have these broad open spaces on which they can entertain and they can live and they can have their grandchildren over and etc. like that. So it was all in and around providing these spaces within that available envelope, and that was the basis of the design. It was working to those really broad setbacks that we were controlled, the ADG requirements, the height requirements, and it was in and around what amenity we could put within that space.
And sorry, Julia, this will be my last question. Julia, in your comments to the panel, you mentioned that you thought there was an error in the report about reference to one of the shadow diagrams. I'm not sure if you said it was what number it was. Can you remember which one you were referring to? When you said, the shadow diagrams actually show something different than what the report says. Could you just advise me what that was again?
So page 96 of the report, there's commentary saying that it was difficult to determine the exact shadow, and that there was overshadowing of the private open spaces. It was difficult to confirm to lack of information on the shadow diagrams.
Okay.
Which is why we redid in a simpler form that we distributed today. But even those that were submitted show that from 10 o'clock, that private open space, even in midwinter,
So
achieves solar access.
So the additional information for 6 Home Hale that you provided was to address that point?
Yes.
Okay, I thought you said it was a different number because I was going to question, oh, that's number 6, but you did say number 6.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
thank you.
that's the unit, and from
We had provided also part of the application with some sun eye diagrams, but to the untrained eye, they can be sometimes a little difficult to understand. So we decided to add some additional information to, which was the three-dimensional elevational diagrams to clearly depict that the shadow is only hitting the bottom corner of the ground up until 10 a.m. and then it's completely clear of all courtyard and all fence line areas.
Okay, thank you.
Ms Morris may not have seen the revised plans, as I understand it, were not re-notified, so that information wouldn't have been shared when we've moved and readjusted the building. The neighbours wouldn't have been aware of those changes.
You mentioned when you were designing the building, you were having reference to established character in Bowral. I wonder if you could tell me what buildings in Bowral have this sort of character and scale.
Well, in fact, I just drove past the site this morning and there's some townhouses with a very steep tiled mansard roof within 100 metres of the site.
Was it number 1, was it Martha Street?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the street, but right around the corner. Look, we kept hearing a lot about the character and the style of the area and etc. And we did, both Juliet and I did 2 separate drive arounds the area and trying to create a bit of context in and around a style, so per se, in and around the area. And we found it to be quite eclectic. We found that there was no real style that was predominant in any sort of residential flat building. We went to Mittagong and went around the places as well. My first attempt at a DA was, I suppose, a lot more contemporary. I think it was referred to as Sydney-centric. In its styling, we had a lot more horizontal lines, etc. in relation to that. We still were trying to bring the Highlands theme in with the barrel brick and the stone and the local stones, etc. from there. But through working with council staff, we did pare that right the way back. We went for what we felt was a much more appropriate scheme within the setback controls and height controls. And we would like to think that we've actually come up with a good fit for the site and a good fit for the area, particularly when you look at it in relation to what's being built on the opposite side of the road. We think it's a great outcome and a great fit, and we feel we've been able to nestle it into the position really well.
Thank you.
I just have one question. I just wondered if you'd like to respond to Rosalind Morris's concerns, where she was talking about the enjoyment she has from her current apartment and her outdoor space and her outlook of trees.
Yep.
And I just wondered if you'd like to respond to that.
Yeah, and the first, she also raised that overshadowing, so I'm very happy to show. I'm very happy to show the shadow diagrams that show that after 10 a.m. in the midwinter, not sure which one of the units you are, but the whole adjoining property is in sun. So totally understand the value of your own wonderful veggie garden and enjoying that sunshine. So that I think we've addressed. The quiet seclusion, I think, was the words that Ms Morris used in terms of living and working at home. There is, have you got the floor plans? Yeah. There is the setback there from the rear boundary. I think we're about 13 metres from the closest point of the wall to adjoining 6 Holmhale, and that wall is bedrooms. So that's not the sort of the loud living areas, and there are no balconies at all along that elevation. So that's not the noise generating activities of a home. So that would be my response.
Yeah, we
that element.
definitely designed.
Sorry, no, it's not a debate. Each person will have a speak. Thank you.
And then tree removal, I think, was the other point that Ms Morris raised about 25 trees being removed. In fact, I think there's 13 trees, some trees being relocated, and then there's obviously a replacement planting scheme And certainly the report raises the query. We've chosen fast-growing species to replace them, but very happy to receive guidance if there were alternate species that council would prefer or the panel would prefer to see planted there. But so there is, in fact, I believe 13 being removed.
I might just
Oh,
add,
yep.
add to that too quickly. The back edge, the southern edge, we did go and designed a very defensive edge there. We were very conscious. We've got 13 and 14 metre setbacks to just to the boundary there, which is again almost the size of a domestic block in width. The only trees we're removing from along that back boundary is because our basement is so well clear of that and our building is so well clear of that. In what we regarded as our arborist told us was inappropriate trees, so noxious weed type trees that are being removed. So we are keeping any tree of value along that rear boundary, and the plan is we're going to replenish and plant that out. So, and the building has been designed with the balconies pushed well around the face to the north, so any balcony or any living area is well away from those southern properties in that design.
Thank you. I just had one. You referred to a property which you said was a more contemporary expression. Was it 1 Marshall Street? Was that the address?
I took a photo and I didn't
Yeah,
write
we might be able to email council and we'll go back and have a look. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, yeah, I
didn't
was
grab
just
the address, but
interested
it
if you
was
had it.
literally-
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
as I drove past
Yeah.
the site
Northern
today.
side, yeah.
Okay, thank
So
you.
we'll get that information to council for the panel.
So, Mr. Jones, did you have a prepared presentation you wanted to give, or do you think everything's been covered already?
I think Juliet's done
Yeah.
a great job in covering it, and it was really only Sophie and myself are here. Sophie's
Yep.
here from a heritage perspective.
Okay,
I'm
so
here
we might.
from an architectural
Yeah.
perspective to answer any questions.
Okay, so we might hear from Sophie Brock. Sophie Bock. Sorry.
So Sophie again is here to answer any questions. She didn't have necessarily a
Oh, okay, all right. So,
Yeah,
I think there are some questions.
Yeah.
So,
It is a sort of heritage question in any case. One thing that strikes me looking at the landscape plans and also the ground floor plan is that the front setback area are largely privatised and there's very few trees. And I would have thought part of the barrel character, and I presume it's somewhere in the DCP, is about green space and trees and so on. Is there any reason why the front area has to be so heavily privatised and there can be more contribution to the public domain?
Are you talking about on Holmhall or?
On both streets. It looks like on both streets there's only like one tree, one new tree, or 2 new trees on Bowral and 1 new tree on Holmhall. And the rest of it is courtyard walls. And the landscape plans just show turf and so on. It doesn't seem like it's a very treed character.
The Holmhall frontage certainly is where the courtyards predominate. Yeah, have you got?
So the idea of
Oh, sorry, if you don't speak, can you come up?
Oh, go away. I don't think this is a heritage question.
I'll bring a chair in.
Maybe you can just stay there.
So the idea of the front courtyards, a classic example is driving past the site today. It's completely, that whole street verge is overgrown and fairly well unkept. The idea is that we're going to keep and enhance all the street trees that are there at the moment, and all that verge tree around the front we're going to enhance. The idea of the courtyards on these apartments, these larger family style apartments, is people tend to have a real sense of ownership over those front courtyard spaces, and so we've got, not only have we got a 50 or 25% of the site as communal open space out at the rear, we've also got these courtyard spaces for those 3 ground floor units, which we really want to give a sense of ownership to those occupants in that front space there. I mean, the positioning of that fencing can be massaged with council if it was felt that a greater setback was more appropriate in relation to that fencing in and around, but it's essentially in and around providing ownership to those ground floor apartments, almost having them like garden apartments in that area.
And we've got trees.
Yeah, we've absolutely got an abundance of trees to be planted in and around there, and you can probably get an idea from the landscape plan, by Taylor Brammer, who we think have done a fabulous job in enhancing that. So it'll be a beautifully screen development running around both frontages there.
Two new trees, T12 and T7 on the landscape plan. On say the Barrel Street frontage. Because it's largely turf with shrubs and so on.
On the landscape plan?
Yeah, this is a landscape plan. So
LA03 version B.
there's a tree in the, like an entry feature tree, and this is all turf and this is all turf. We can see that. And it doesn't seem to have a very treed character.
I mean, if you drive past the site at the moment, and even when we were doing the
Not the street trees, your site, the development site.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, you'll see that all that frontage and corner peripheral tree cover is going to remain, and we would hope to be enhanced by the trees in and around the frontage there. I understand, and again, we can add more trees if it's felt to be appropriate. We could obviously accept some conditions to do that, but again, you know, I've kind of left that to the expert in Matthew Taylor. He does a brilliant design in any sort of work in and around the area here. So we'd be heavily relying on his advice in relation to what was an appropriate outcome in that front area.
Well, if you felt that there needed to be additional trees, that could be conditioned and required, and we could make sure they could be accommodated.
Thank you. So Sophie, I think you didn't have a prepared presentation, you're just available for questions. Okay, so I'll just start with Heather then. I guess I'd just ask, having read the report and the council's consultant heritage advisor has been critical of the proposal. It's not in a heritage conservation area, but it's next to a heritage conservation area. So I just wondered if you could respond to that, heritage expert to heritage expert.
Yes.
You've read the report?
Yes, so
Yeah.
we have, do you mean the report, the heritage impact statement that we prepared? which
No, I
considered-
was just wondering if you've, having read the council's
Yes, I read that, yes.
advisors' comments on the scheme, did you have any response for us?
Yeah, I mean, we do think that Cameron and the team have gone to quite a lot of trouble to respond to council's previous comments, which had specific heritage comments about requesting a revised design. So the revised design does include it achieves what we think is a more residential character to this building, which fits more suitably to the area. It involves two building masses separated by a breezeway, a glazed breezeway, which is recessed from the front facade on Home House Street. More so, to reduce the massing of that building. It incorporates the third floor apartments into something what Karen was describing before as a mansard roof form, which we think is appropriate for something that's very close to a heritage conservation area. We've looked at how it might affect the setting of the heritage item at 67 Bendooley Street. It's not on the same frontage, obviously, as that street, so we think that impact is acceptable. And there's quite a big, as Cameron said before, that communal space creates quite a substantial setback from that southern boundary, which is again another area of separation from the heritage conservation area. So that's our assessment at the moment.
And you're happy with the Barrel Street frontage treatment?
Again, we were just talking about the trees, but there is also a setback from the edge of that conservation area. As we were saying before, it is a transitional location between different types of development, as it's on the edge of a conservation area. We're looking at whether views will be retained towards the conservation area, which they will be, whether when you're in the conservation area the existing setting and character will be retained, which it will be. We've done some work to change the materiality of the building to get the brickwork in that was requested by council, which we think is suitable for that area. So yeah, that's...
Oh, sorry, Mr. Steph.
Can I just ask if any consideration was given by Taylor Brammer to the impact that making a large cut in the level in the eastern corner will have on the adjoining trees, the trees on the adjoining sites, because it will change the water table?
That was more so the arborist. He's done a full assessment of the site, including the trees on the surrounding sites, and he's more than comfortable with the approach that we've taken here. There's actually nearly a 3 metre setback to that cut there running down that driveway side, or 2.76 or 78, I think it is, running down that side. So, and it is, again, it's not a huge cut in that corner there. It's about 1.5 metres in that area there. So we did have Ross Jackson, again, a very experienced arborist, go through the site and do a full assessment of both adjoining and trees on the site itself.
So in that southeast corner, I mean, you'll be reducing the floor level from natural ground by over 1 metre, 1 metre and a bit. And the trees on the adjoining heritage site, it appears to me, would be relying on that corner for their water table and their natural growth. Is there any possibility that that corner could be left at a higher level so you could retain more trees in that corner, which is the thing that screens the heritage item from the development?
It would all be to do, again, I'm happy to sit with council and work a plan. It would all be to do with the driveway grade and location of the visitor spaces at the base of the driveway there, in and around how we could manipulate that space. But, you know, there is opportunity again there to have a look at that, and maybe if we were to splay that back corner, it might allow for better water flow or groundwater flow through that space there towards those trees. That's, again, definitely something we can look at.
Well, I think I'm right in saying that all of that area along the southern and eastern corner are not affected by the garage. The garage is set well back from
Yes,
that.
correct.
So that's been dropped to give access to courtyard areas off the units.
Yep.
And the southeast corner, in that sense, isn't as important to any of the units, but is important to the retention of the existing trees and the trees on the adjoining site.
Mhm.
All right. Can I just ask, those trees do create a major visual screen, if you like, from the heritage item to this site? So they're in, the ones in that corner, yes. Yes, and the ones on the adjoining sites in that corner, which would be affected by excavating at their roots.
We're levelling, we're doing local levelling, just in that area.
Did you have any? Okay, so I had another speaker for the applicant, Adam Dominelli. Did he still wish to speak?
Adam is the landowner and applicant, and he was just here if anybody
Okay.
wanted to ask.
All right, okay, yeah. I don't think we had any questions for the, well, thank you for coming along and speaking to us today. As indicated, we'll go into closed session at the end of the public meeting, and afterwards we'll announce our decision, which will be live streamed. So the next item is item 6.3, the development application for 24 Waverley Parade, Mittagong, and as I have a conflict, I won't be staying. Sorry? Another speaker? Oh, for 6.3? Yeah. Got the list, you know.
Oh, did she address?
Sorry. Sorry, did Gwen Ballard speak? No, please come forward. Sorry, I missed you. Please come forward. Lisa, do you want to get the applicant's name back in case they want to hear this? Yeah, sorry. Have the applicant's team still out there? Yeah. Sorry, just take a seat, yeah. I'm just letting the applicants know that there might be something that you say that they want to respond to. For some reason I ticked too. Sorry, I just thought I bet you go back. I actually missed one of the objectors. I'm sorry. So I just thought in case something was raised that you hadn't had an opportunity
Thank
to
you.
discuss. So please proceed.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Are ready to go? Yes, thank you. My name is Gwen Bullard. I own the neighbouring property, 61 Barrel Street, and would be severely impacted should this development be approved, as would the neighbours to the rear of 2 Holmhale Street, being 67 Bendooley Street and 3/6 Holmhale Street. The plan shows 3 to 4 bedroom apartments, all with balconies, which invites family occupation. This would result in my having 6 families overlooking my house and garden. The substantial loss of privacy and enjoyment of my house and garden and the noise would be totally unacceptable. The height of the proposed building would cause shadowing and loss of light. The afternoon sun would be completely blocked, something which is much needed over the winter months. Traffic congestion on Barrel Street is of great concern to me. The Barrel and Bongbong Street roundabout would be one of the busiest in Barrel. Daily, I see traffic banked back as far as Bendooley Street roundabout in front of my property. The problem is compounded by more than 250 cars entering and exiting the medical centre directly opposite. There is also another looming problem when Mayfield Gardens is completed, when more than 40 cars will enter and exit the complex, followed by another 24 cars entering and exiting the proposed development if approved. Total gridlock would ensure at peak times. The architecture of the proposed development is not in keeping with the older homes in Barrel. Many single-storey villas have been built around Barrel, which do blend with the architecture of, in quotes, old Barrel. I always envisaged a small complex of villas such as this being built on the development site. The architecture of the proposed development would be perfect in Walleye Creek or Mascot, but not in Barrel, especially alongside a heritage area. My property lay derelict for 11 years before I purchased it 5 years ago, the garden being a complete jungle, the vegetation being so great that the house could be seen from the road. I have worked tirelessly to restore the house and garden to what it once was, and now thoroughly enjoy living here. The thought of losing all this enjoyment devastates me, not to forget the valuation of my property plummeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just check. Sorry, applicants team. Juliet Grant, did you want to respond to any of that, or do you think you've covered it all already?
The only thing that was, I think,
But perhaps I might just, if you could just vacate the...
Vacate?
Yeah, thank you. If you could step down.
Thank you.
Yeah, just so that you've got the microphone and you can be heard, Juliet. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'd previously covered the noise and shadowing questions and architecture. I didn't catch the lady's name, I'm afraid, but she just mentioned traffic congestion, and I just would point out that in the council report that the council's traffic engineers had assessed the application and raised no objection. So that was the only thing I was going to add.
Thank you. So as I was indicating previously, I will now leave the chamber and Heather Wharton will take over chairing the meeting for item 6.3 and Heather will also close the meeting at the end of that. Thank you.
Okay, over to item 6.3, which is the review of the development application 22/0223.01, demolition of existing building and construction of multi-dwelling housing comprising 4 dwellings on at 24 Waverley Parade in Mittagong. We have 4 registered speakers. We have Jennifer Hill speaking as an objector, and for the applicant we have Scott Lee, Justin Day and Sabone Nardin. So I guess if Ms. Hill is here, we'll hear from you first, please.
Well, thank you for allowing me to address you today, which I do on behalf of 20 neighbours who would object to this development application again. There are many more interested objectors who would have wished to have been here today, however the timing of the panel meeting made this impossible. I'm the immediate neighbour at number 22. On behalf of the community, we would like to agree with the previous independent panel and the Council's current recommendation that the proposed development is considered unsatisfactory and the applicant has not successfully addressed the reasons for refusal contained in the original application. Therefore, this review application is recommended for refusal. We would like to reinforce our comments in the previous panel meeting regarding the impact to the amenity that the proposed development will have, and that it does not conform to the minimum standards of the Mittagong Development Council plans. If approved, it would significantly damage the character and amenity of the surrounding neighbourhood, and which would encroach on neighbours' acoustic and visual privacy. As our previous comments included areas such as minimum frontage of a lot for multi-dwelling development, provision of sufficient parking on site, not on the road, did not provide, I quote the MDCP, efficient placement and orientation of dwellings in a suitable location and are not in keeping with the desired future character of the area. A2.2.6, it does not demonstrate an appreciation of the existing streetscape, and it does not enhance the character of individual streets within the town through appropriate built form design. It is merely maximising the amount of properties on the land to create profit, as it definitely does not provide areas of private open space which can make a positive contribution to the overall visual amenity of the locality. A2.2.7 does not contribute to the protection of public views and vista, nor of the existing properties. Appropriate landscaping is insufficient, and the removal of existing trees has already affected the amenity of surrounding neighbours and gardens and bird life. 2.28, they state it improves vegetation on site, but that's because the trees are already removed. P171 C.3, their argument that the upper storey dwellings have been redesigned to sit well back from the main building line to minimise overlooking adjacent properties. Well, it's ridiculous. The buildings are in everyone's backyard and majorly affect the amenity of existing dwellings. P172G, MDCP requires buildings are designed and sited as to preserve the visual and acoustic privacy of adjoining residential development and to ensure adequate privacy of dwellings and courtyards with the proposed development. This development does not comply with this and dramatically affects the amenity of the neighbouring properties. Existing two-storey dwellings are in line with the housing line and are not in anyone's backyard as this design is. P298. The proposed development application states that the development is fully compliant with the relevant planning controls, which it is not. There's a lot of community objection to this development and the development of this size, which will grossly affect the local amenity. The area is of outstanding beauty and nature, and people move there for a reason. Sorry. For quality of life, for nature and space. This is not Camden, Campbelltown or Mossvale or other development areas. Previous developments have pushed through with no consultation. We do not want any more of that, which is why the community is speaking up about this. We're happy for development to occur, but not when it affects the amenity so much and does not comply with council's own development controls. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just don't want you to be too upset, but I just want to ask you, the emphasis of this report is about the trees. Do you have any particular neighbourhood view or community view or on the, you've gone through your issues with the development itself. I just want to see if you had any particular strong view one way or the other about the cedrus tree and the liquid amber and the eucalypt for that matter.
The streetscape, the what's existing there, the beauty of it, would be gone.
Okay, thanks. Any
Do you understand that this is an area in transition, that it's been rezoned for this sort of development, and that eventually all of this area will be higher density development? Do you understand that?
Yes, but it doesn't have to be full. It doesn't have to be overlooking people's backyards.
No, but I'm saying, do you understand that your site, as well as this site, and the sites on the other side of the road, will eventually be redeveloped for this sort of development?
Yes, but that's why you hope people make sensible choices about how it's going to work and how it fits in to what's already existing there and how people are choosing to live their lives there.
Thank you.
Just following on from Robert's question, so this proposed development is showing single-storey development plus 2 stories at the back.
In the backyard.
Yeah. So if you had to narrow it down to your main concern with this, would it be the height being in the rear that potentially has more of an impact overlooking your backyard than if it was a single story, for example? I'm not designing it for. I'm just trying to understand what is the main thing that you're so concerned about.
Single story would obviously be far better. The amount in that space, 4 seems an awful lot in the space, and for what's already occurring in the street. We have a preschool, we have high school in the street. The street is already very, very congested. So you've got added, problems there. We've still got stormwater issues that haven't been developed, haven't been addressed at all. I haven't seen anything that's sort of, with the runoff of the water into the street hasn't been addressed. So I'm not opposed to, anything going, but 2-story in people's backyard where that is a problem for all of us that are around. Okay, sorry.
Okay, now we have for the applicant, we have Scott Lee. Scott, are you going first? Or do you want to go together? So we do have your... Sorry, we do have, when we get to talk about the ins and outs of the tree, we do have the amended arborist report that's been given to us.
Fantastic, yeah. Okay, so if I may,
Yep.
just make it just a
Thank you.
couple of brief opening remarks before I get the owner, Justine Turnadata, to speak, and we have the arborist, our Bonnie
If
Nadine,
you
with
could
us as well. So.
address some of the issues in terms of the development generally as well, that would be good, raised by by Jennifer.
Justine will do that.
Okay.
I was just going to say in opening that, having regard to the original assessment report and the report for the review, it appears that the singular issue denying an approval is the retention of the large cypress at the front of the site. Put simply, our position is that we don't believe that this tree is of such significance that it should be given the determinative weight over what would otherwise, or is otherwise, a positive and compliant multi-dwelling scheme. The tree, while it's large and healthy at the moment, it does not have what we would consider to be the necessary cultural, ecological or landscape visual significance to determine the matter. That's all been our position all along. We have taken on board what the panel had said last time. That's why we have our arborist with us this afternoon, who's done the report that I think you've just referred to. But I'm happy to hand over to Justine to make some more detailed comments in relation to the scheme.
Before you do that, can you just clarify? So reading the arborist report, it says that it implies that now you're going to aim to try and keep the cedrus tree. Can you just clarify that that is the applicant's current position, like the application's changed now, in effect?
Well, the panel, previous panel decision was that the matter was refused on the basis of retaining the tree. We submitted the review. During that process, or investigated those issues more thoroughly, and Bonnie can talk to her report. My remarks are, I suppose, our position. We don't believe that the tree is of such significance that it must be retained. However, the arborist report says that we can retain the tree, subject to certain recommendations, and allow the development as submitted to proceed. Now, an approval is quite clearly a preferable outcome than a refusal of the whole development application, and that's what we're seeking. The report, or the recommendation of the review was to refuse the application, but we believe that it's possible to approve it, subject to the recommendations in the arborist report.
So
if that's what the panel wishes to do.
So just so I'm clear in my mind, your position currently is that the tree could be removed, but the arborist report says, at the request of council, the subject tree is to be retained and protected. So I just want to know, what is the actual application that we're considering? Is it based on removal of the tree, or you're saying that you're happy to consider retention subject to whatever conditions or requirements?
That's right. If the panel believes that the tree must remain, which is the current position that the panel reached last time, and there's the recommendation of the review not to change that, well, then we're saying that we think we can keep the tree and keep the development subject to the recommendations in the arborist report. What I've just said at the beginning is that we don't believe that the tree is of such significance that is necessary. And in the long term, we believe it would be better to remove the tree in this medium density context and plant replacement trees that will grow and mature with the medium density development. That's what we think is a better long-term outcome. But an approval, if the panel is of the view the tree must stay, well then we believe we can accommodate that.
Okay. I guess we'll hear from the arborist. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Justine Turner-Day and I'm the owner of the property at 24 Waverley Parade. I've enjoyed living there for the last 2 years, and indeed I've lived in the Highlands for the last 24 years, and my children are born down here. I've spent the last 14 months with my planning team carefully addressing all council's requirements to design this enclave of highly desirable, low maintenance and attractive private cottages. And in actual fact, one of my main motivations for doing that is to actually downsize to one myself, because I love the area so much. The dwellings are in keeping with the aesthetics and the amenity of the local area, and they meet, if not exceed, council guidelines compared to other recently completed developments of a similar size. And I'll make note of the multi-storey dwellings on Oxford Street around the corner from me. And I think my local community see developments like that, and that's the kind of thing they don't want, which is why I've designed these individual cottages of ideal downsizes that still provide private open spaces. They're all at least 300 square metres of strata, and it will be like living in your own little enclave. Properties in the Southern Highlands which have been designed for people who don't want large gardens but still want a balance between attractive, thoughtful design, private open space, low maintenance and a sense of community, all within proximity of local amenities and a township of very few. These cottages have been designed with all these objectives in mind. The LEP provides a set of guidelines which development applications must comply and be assessed against to provide the framework for the approval process. To address the LEP in its entirety, we continue to work with Council to address their feedback and deliver on all the outcomes put forward. This included engineering a driveway that provided multiple passing and off-street opportunities. It included landscaping of 53.9%, which exceeds the minimum of 50%, designated private open space per cottage of at least 50 square metres, and as I said, each individual strata is around 300 square metres each, community-based landscape area in the front of the development, privacy of neighbouring properties, and in fact I'd just like to point out that in my backyard, one of my neighbouring properties has just extended their residential place off Oxley Drive and put a second storey on, which I didn't object to at the time, which is I think around about 1.6 metres higher than the top of my 2 stories at the rear of the yard, and that is actually looking into my backyard now. So development is imminent, but sympathetic development that really is in keeping with the local area is what community should be looking for. I also wanted to provide unobstructed solar access to all neighbouring properties, and the shadow diagrams show that there is no significant impact on any of my neighbouring properties. A detailed landscape design and planting of native appropriate trees that are sympathetic to the local area has been worked on since the last application, which the previous panel meeting requested. And also spent a lot of time engineering the stormwater collection, retention and distribution to the street. It is an issue in Waverley Parade. I'm very, very conscious of that, and one of the reasons why the rear gum trees were removed is because there needs to be a significant swale at the very rear of the property which has been engineered, which will actually benefit all the properties on there for collecting the water with appropriate rain gardens. The previous planning meeting in June to consider the DA was actually supported by a 118-page report prepared by Council which detailed all considerations and actually supported this DA for approval based on the development's merit. The panel did not seek clarification at the time of any aspect of this report other than raising concerns around the Cedrus deodara tree, which is in the front of the property, although a detailed arborist report was available for panel members to review at the time. In the Council preparing this report and reaching its recommendation, it appeared that they had considered the urban tree policy for the Shire and the inappropriate nature of the tree in question for a medium density environment, being that it was never raised as a concern by Council to any of our team at any point in time during the 14-month DA process, nor was it identified as a factor in the final report which recommended the DA for approval. Whilst it is true that the tree is an excellent specimen of its type, Council could verify that applications for removal of trees of this particular species are frequent due to their impediment of solar access, extensive tree protection zone, bushfire hazard and potential capacity to grow, all of which present a considerable constraint and threat to any residential property, not just R3 zoning. The previous panel asked as to whether consideration had been given to retaining the tree, and at that time I wasn't a registered speaker. So now that I am here, the answer to that question is clearly yes. Having lived there in the property myself for the last 2 years, I've been able to assess this tree as a part of the design process, and my observations from a homeowner's perspective include the root systems caused issues with the house plumbing, and plumbers have been advised that this will potentially be an annual service to unblock drains. The gardens are overshadowed by at least a 10 by 10 metre radius or 100 square metres, meaning that it significantly impacts the opportunity to plant or grow successfully in the front of the property, and would certainly impact having a north-facing community garden as I've presented in the detailed landscape drawings. Tree litter impacts maintenance both on the ground and in the gutters in close proximity properties and is a bushfire hazard. The tree is not yet fully grown, which will see further ground degradation and overshadowing. It is still our view that the tree is not of as such significance that it must be retained. However, our arborist report, the latest one that you should have a copy of, really does have detailed recommendations that will allow us to maintain this tree and allow the approval of the development, and that's what I'm asking the panel to do today. So I'd now like to hand over to Siobhan Naden, who's from Aviculture and has prepared the impact assessment report. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, we weren't really keeping close track of the time there, so you've said a lot, so that's good. Before we hand over to the arborist, is there any questions for the owner? Panel?
Was consideration given to, in this period between the refusal and now, to modifying the design to take it further away from the tree?
It's not actually possible, because to do that we would have to connect. Well, firstly, I'll go back a step. I really wanted to actually design 4 single-storey dwellings. That's what I wanted, because there's a lot of single ladies like myself and downsizers that want single-storey, but there's also blended families, and that's what the 2 stories at the rear are intended for. The reason that I couldn't achieve 4 single-storey houses is because you have to meet the 50% landscape design as a part of the approval process. So it was a matter of that fine balance of being able to give council everything they want. And my original application that I withdrew actually was a different driveway scheme and driveways at the back, which would have slightly changed things. So yes, the answer to that is I did consider that, but to actually get over the 50% landscaping, I mean, this is nearly an 1,800 square metre block, and I think what we have to be mindful of is that if this had been in Newcastle, this particular site was in Newcastle, they'd put 6 2-storey on. There is no 50% landscaping that's required in other areas, and one of the reasons why it's required down here, which I agree with, is to keep the amenity of the area. It is an R3 zoned area, and I'm actually so proud of what my team has designed for here, because it is going to be a beautiful place to live, and I think the neighbouring properties should realise that it could be much, much worse on there. So, you know, you could get a huge developer come in that actually wants to build 4 2-storey. I've actually chosen to try and get a balance between that and make half of them single-storey to be able to be as sympathetic to the area as possible and be as least obtrusive. And at the moment, I don't know if you've heard to drive by, but the house that's on there at the moment is a very ordinary red brick box house. What I'm putting on there are lovely Hampton style clad cottages, very much in keeping with a lot of the other cottages that are facing Oxley Drive and in and around the Highlands.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I have a question. Maybe Scott might be the best person
Sorry,
to answer.
Sorry, I did make a mistake. I forgot Linda was asking a question. You could just stay there. Thank you. Yes. Sorry.
Yes.
I thought Scott might be the best one to answer this question. You've heard what the adjoining neighbour said about her concerns about her loss of amenity, and I wonder if you'd like to respond to that about lack of loss of privacy and perhaps the rationale behind locating the 2-storey dwellings at the rear rather than the front of the property.
Sorry, musical chairs. The property actually slopes from the rear to the street. If we put the 2 stories at the front, they would overshadow the properties at the back. So the fact that we're working down towards the street gives everybody, solar passive the best outcome. So if you actually have a look at the floor plans, the two single stories have their entertainment alfresco areas to the front, so they get the northeasterly sun. My original design, which I couldn't do because of the driveway, and I only managed to achieve 48.6% landscaping, was actually to flip the rear two stories so that the entertainment was at the front as well and the garages were at the rear. Does that answer the question?
The issue of overlooking.
Yeah, the windows, if you actually have a look at the window placements, there isn't actually any windows overlooking any of the side properties. They're all the bedrooms and they're up high and they're the long windows. So, and we did actually provide in the last set of plans 3D perspectives of where you would be looking out from the front, and it's actually over the existing single-storey properties out towards the Lake Alexandria Reserve.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I actually can't advocate for any development. I'm just here to answer questions or concerns that you may have. I suppose the first plans that came through were based on a solid slab, which meant the tree in question could not be retained, and that's what we reported on. The second, when we worked with Justine with the view to retain the tree, so with design specifications, that tree is retainable. It will need to be uplifted, but it is retainable if we look at a different type of construction methodology to have bearers and joists on that first portion of the, of the first building there. The street tree is retainable. We have designed a driveway using a cantilevered slab to make sure that the area through the tree protection zone is, I suppose, is protected. Currently it's not. At the moment it's just a dirt driveway and the area surrounding the tree is compacted. So I suppose the improvement of the driveway in that area will increase the sustainability of that street tree. So, but I suppose if we want to talk about the particular tree, it does have the growth capacity of 40 metres and it can spread up to 20 metres. Typically, I would not recommend this species of tree to be put in a small residential yard due to the growth capacity of them and the overshadowing. It's a hard one to put a value on the tree. It is a high retention value tree because it's very healthy. But does it mean it's the right tree for that particular position? I would say not, due to the future capacity growth of it, the overshadowing. Also to the neighbouring trees are eucalyptus as well. It may have a detrimental impact on that. Quite often in my role, we are often removing trees of that species, which are planted as little tiny Christmas trees, which look beautiful, but then down the track, they really have sort of bad outcomes for services, overshadowing and houses. However, based on the current plan now and with engineering specifications, that tree is retainable and it will stay sustainable as well as the street tree.
Okay, so just following on from that, has that formed, I understand you haven't changed anything in the DA though.
No.
So those specifications and all that information, the council doesn't actually have that?
No, that will come with the construction certificate. So the engineering will then design that slab based on my recommendations. So if the tree's to be retained, they will engineer the slab on bearers and joists, and therefore we can then demonstrate that it will be sustainable. However, engineering specifications at this stage haven't been provided to me or developed.
And what, as the design is now, what intrusion into the TPZ would there be?
At the moment, the TPZ intrusion is 30.5%. However, with a bearers and joists construction methodology, we can reduce that significantly. There's enough deep soil on the opposite side of the tree and surrounding the tree. My only issue is that we will have to prune it up but that can happen. It won't be detrimental to the tree, but it is sustainable, and it is cantilevers or bearers and joists are acceptable within a tree protection zone.
We understand the council had, unfortunately it's not in our report, I guess because of the timing, but I understand that council's arborist has read the revised report. And I was wondering if I could ask Mr. Swan to just give us a summary of what the response to the report is.
Sure.
And so it's on the record.
Sure. So he's had the opportunity, like discussed with him, your updated arborist report from submitted last week. He has, in respect of tree one,
The street tree, yes.
street tree, he wasn't overly concerned about the 13% intrusion.
That's correct.
It was more about the construction methodology.
Yes.
And I guess, the route mapping that may need to occur to ensure that that tree can
Yes.
be retained.
At the moment, the current encroachment or the proposed encroachment is 13%. That's only 3% over the 10% acceptable allowance. So we're not talking about a major encroachment.
And that's what he was generally
Yeah.
comfortable with,
Yes.
13%.
Yes.
Close to 10%.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was
So
more to do with
the construction. Yeah.
around
Yes.
the works within the road reserve.
Yeah.
To ensure that that tree is retained.
Is retained. Yes.
within the
Yeah.
30%
Yeah.
increase.
So generally, at this point in time, I can state that it is sustainable if we used bearers and joists or permeable paving. However, that's generally next under the construction phase of the project. I would then work with the engineer we would provide the engineering specifications to demonstrate how that could, so what we're proposing at the point, we will have to do some route mapping first to see whether permeable paving would be an appropriate response. Otherwise, we would do a cantilevered portion of a driveway. It's only a very small portion that goes across the tree protection zone.
Tree 3, he was more concerned about the 30%
Yes.
encroachment
Yes.
into the TPZ.
Mm-hmm.
His view was that was unsustainable, notwithstanding, the construction methods.
Yes.
construction methodologies
Yeah.
that
Jim,
you put forward.
yeah, with due sorry, continue.
His view was that to ensure that that tree is to be retained, the only viable way to achieve that would be to incorporate the suggestions that you've made, but also to increase the setback of the actual physical dwelling from that tree.
Okay, so with all due respect to Jim, I would disagree with that. We can encroach trees, over 60% if need be, with, using passive construction methodology. Typically, if we were trenching within that area, of course, it would not be an acceptable level of encroachment. However, with route mapping and with bearers and joists to avoid removing any roots, then that it can be quite successful, and there is enough deep soil volume surrounding that tree to support the sustainability of the existing root system. So unfortunately, I would disagree with Jim on that one. Whereas, and I'm more than happy to discuss that with him. The Australian standards have got these tree protection conditions and this building methodology in place so that we actually can get quite close to trees. The street tree out the front is a very good example of how resilient trees are, with the fact that it's compacted, it has guttering and tar and all the rest of it. So what we're proposing is acceptable under Australian standards, protection of trees on development sites.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Thank you. Any other questions of the... Thank you.
Just got to remember what it is now.
It's a long day.
Yes, I remember what it is. You said the tree is very healthy.
Yes, it is.
But it has the potential to grow up to 40 metres in height.
Yes, it does.
Given its location and I don't know how long ago it was planted, what do you think is life expectancy of that tree if there was a development, as you're suggesting, near it?
Based on what we're proposing, it would have a normal life expectancy to, it could be over 120 years.
Okay.
It is
So very long term.
Very long term, and it's a significantly large tree. In terms of leaf drop and those kinds of issues, I don't find them a constraint to any development, nor that should they be. Trees are trees, they're biological entities, they make mess. We have to deal with that. My issue would be, is that particular tree in that particular location. It wouldn't matter what they did, that tree is going to be an issue moving forward because of the growth capacity of it. It's a shame, it's a beautiful tree. Unfortunately, through the Highlands, we see a lot of it, inappropriate species placed in areas they shouldn't be, which then causes a massive knock-on effect, with neighbouring properties. However, it is retainable. It will continue to grow, and we can make sure. And I am confident that it will be retainable, and the standards support that retention if we follow this construction methodology.
And the other strategy that you've been looking at, which was to remove some of the lower branches.
Yes.
What is your opinion about how you think that will end up looking as the tree grows? Its stability, and will you end up with a very, very large tree with just a thing on the top?
We call them lollipops in our industry. Look, based on what we have to do at the moment, I think it's 2.9 metres to provide clearance, which I think is acceptable. So it then would provide opportunity to utilise underneath the tree. Unfortunately, there's limited landscape opportunities because of the density of the foliage. However, at 2.9 metres, of course, we will lose that beautiful long sweeping habit. It doesn't really have it now. So I don't believe it would be an issue, and I don't believe it would cause a windsailing or a lollipop issue, because that's not what we want.
So just to clarify that point about the removing of the lower branches, was that, is that in order to assist the landscaped area at the front of the site, or is it, what does it do to the tree?
It will provide clearance for the proposed first house, so enough clearance.
Right, so it's a physical thing.
It's a physical thing for clearance allowance, so
Right.
It can be done so that we have balance as well to the tree, so we won't be cutting one side or pruning one side of the tree to create instability. The most important thing is that we don't want to create risk by poor pruning techniques. But I'm satisfied, at that 2.9 metre mark, which we can have a look at it as well, that it will be fine, and aesthetically it won't detract too much from the area. But, uplifting these types of trees, again, it will sort of affect the aesthetics of the tree. However, we have to somehow find a compromise, I suppose, in this situation. But it is sustainable based on what we have, and I don't believe that pruning will exacerbate or cause any further risk or, end up with a lollipop effect.
I'll just ask one more question, and then we'll go to Robert. Have you got any others? Any questions? Okay. So if the tree was to be, if the dwelling was to be moved out of the TPZ of the tree, then you wouldn't need any special construction techniques?
That's correct, but the size of the tree protection zone, which I don't have it in front of me, I do apologise, is very large.
And so I guess, do you have your report there, or on the drawings, just so I get it clear in my mind, if you're going to place a dwelling or anything on the site clear of the tree, how much further from the tree would it need to be now?
I don't have the tree protection zone in front of me, I do apologise.
Got your report?
The report, it'll be right down the end with all the colourful data. Very long data.
I can give you the report.
Sure.
I did see it, but
Thank you. Okay, where are we? Tree one. I can't read that. I've got my glasses on. DBH, tree protection zone.
So this one says 7.86?
No, it's tree number 2.
8. Tree number 2? That says 8.
It's 8.04 metres.
Right. So
to avoid the tree protection zone entirely, it would be over 8 metres.
So in terms of on the drawing where you've got your I presume this is to scale, the actual tree protection zone is accurately shown?
Sorry, that's not my plan. That's a landscaping plan. But the tree protection zone is... Here we go. It's actually tree 3, sorry. Tree 3. Sorry, yeah. Yes, it is. So the drawing that you're looking at the moment, this is the location of the tree. This is the tree protection zone. This is the portion of encroachment from the building outline here. Right. So what we're proposing is for the slab to be cantilevered and just piers to be placed surrounding it. Around this area has enough deep soil for the tree to remain sustainable.
Okay, so just for the other panel, have you got the right page? What page is that?
It's page number 11. Yeah. So the T. So. Yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry. So yes, it goes. The value is 30.3% of encroachment.
In terms of your diagram, it would extend across 50% of Cottage Hall.
Correct. Yes. So that's why the original application was, the first application was based on a concrete slab, which would require trenching within that tree protection zone, therefore it couldn't be retained.
Okay, all right, that's all good. Any other questions from the panel on this? Anything else you want to add, Jeremy? Okay.
Other than the arborist is correct. When you compare the updated arborist report and the TPZ, it is different to what is shown on the landscape plan.
Okay, so we shouldn't use the landscape plan.
My arborist report, yes. Yep. Yes.
Okay. All right, okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings our meeting to a close at 3:57 p.m. Thanks very much. Thanks for everyone who attended and contributed to the meeting. Thank you.